I'm going to start right now with this conversation, Dr. Prince, because unlike any other conversation that I will be having on this platform, this is about as conversational as it's going to get, because we have known each other since we were children.
That's true.
So, and in your capacity as clearly a scholar at Stanford, and as a scientist, I want to talk all about you, your research, and everything you do. I want to talk a little bit about California. You and I met each other as kids at the University of Miami. You're my grand little brother in the fraternity.
That's right. Yeah.
And a close friend of mine. But you're now living in California and originally from Missouri, and I am still living in Miami for all practical purposes, originally from Miami, even though born in Albany to 2 Cuban refugees. But I just want to talk to you about this moment. It was wonderful to catch up with you just a few days ago, just having our little Zoom happy hour. So we've sort of caught up a little bit, but just first of all, how nice to talk to you, and tell me a little bit about you, like you, the person who was on our national championship football team, who went on beyond the University of Miami to go to med school and to teach and to do all your research, and tell me what you're going to be doing at Stanford. Just do a little intro of Dr. Prince.
Sure. No, it's great. Thanks for this opportunity, Xavier. It's been too long, hasn't it? We need to make sure we keep in touch much more frequently. But I understand. We both get busy. It's how it happens. But so all this really did start at UM. I was always interested in science. I thought research sounded kind of cool and fun, right? And I owe it to the fact that Miami is at a place where an undergraduate who's interested in something, they have avenues that they can pursue their wildest dreams and interests. And I was able to, as a sophomore at Miami, just basically knock on doors in the chemistry department and say, hey, anybody interested in taking an undergraduate in their lab who's interested in research? And Carl Hoff in the Department of Chemistry opened his lab to me, and I didn't break, well, I did break a few things, but didn't break too much, I was going to say. And I became immersed in the world of the organometallic thermodynamics, so chromium, tungsten, and molybdenum complexes, and was just completely blown away by how fun and how exciting and how exhilarating science was. The idea that you could understand how things worked in a way that maybe no one had ever understood before, but were always true, right? From the beginning of time in the universe. And to be able to scratch at that a little bit and to understand something in a way that nobody else had thought of before, regardless of what it was it just kind of resonated with me personally. And so that was truly the moment as an undergraduate at Miami where I thought, I think this whole science thing is going to be for me. And, but, I was torn. I was like, okay, science is a big field. What kind of science? I like chemistry, sure. But I'd always thought that maybe I would go to medical school and try to help people. And I just so happened, I fell into the idea of being a physician scientist and going through an MD PhD program, and became interested in lung physiology by pure serendipity. I happened to be a first-year MD PhD student the year they cloned the gene that causes cystic fibrosis. There's defects cause cystic fibrosis, and there just happened to be a large cystic fibrosis research center at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, where I was working and going to school. And so again, I jumped on that and became fascinated with lung biology, and then from there, ended up staying in that field during my postdoctoral fellowship and both residency and fellowship training, and became more and more interested in lung development and the immune system of the lung and how it responds to pathogens and injury, how the lung can potentially regenerate. And since then, I've just, it's been kind of this winding path as opportunities have presented itself. And I've just been really fortunate to have a lot of opportunities to pursue this.
Where have you
And so,
stopped along the way? I remember time and time again being so proud of Lance Prince every time. I remember when you called me and said you were doing the MD PhD. Then I remember your faculty appointments. Just take us through that so I don't have to read your resume, even though people can just scroll down and read the resume at the bottom of the screen.
sure. So yeah, so the MD PhD program is basically designed for people like myself who are interested, who want to be doctors, but they also want to do science and do research. And the goal is to understand the basic mechanisms of disease. That's really the focus. And so there's a lot of work going on around medicine about finding new drugs, understanding the population genetics of disease risk, all that kind of stuff. But the goal of this kind of training is really for people to understand at the basic level how people get sick or how they get well, right? And then by understanding that at a very basic molecular level and cellular level, can we then be smarter about developing new therapies and strategies? And so it's kind of a long program. I was there for a little bit over 7 years going through the MD PhD, and then did a couple extra years of postdoctoral research at the University of Iowa in Michael Walsh's lab, who's fantastic lung biologist, works on cystic fibrosis and a few other things. Then I did residency in pediatrics there at the University of Iowa, where I started my getting my clinical training a little bit, and then stayed at the University of Iowa for a fellowship in neonatal perinatal medicine. And it was during my residency that I became fascinated with the neonatal intensive care unit. And because it's a very, very, very unique environment in medicine. The NICU, as we call it, is very different than any other clinical environment, because the majority of our patients have not acquired a disease. The majority of our patients have developmental abnormalities, or they were born way too soon. They were born a healthy, very immature fetus, basically. And so it's our job to try to maintain normal human development in the face of a baby requiring intensive care. And we certainly also have patients who have birth defects, who have genetic disorders, have metabolic disorders, who are born with devastating infections, things like that. So it's a little bit of a variety, but what was captivating about it for me was that not only was the physiology interesting and fascinating, but it was the idea that we're not trying to necessarily combat a disease at the end of life and the human lifespan. What we're really trying to do is facilitate that normal developmental process so that a baby can go home from the NICU and then go on to live for another 80, 90 years and have everything else happen to them throughout the course of their life that any other person would. And so it's a different way of looking at the human lifespan in medicine. And so since then, I've been a neonatologist, and I've been a scientist as well. My first faculty position was back at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. From there, I moved to Vanderbilt University and kind of built my research program, expanded it there. About a little over 7 years ago, I was recruited out here and now I'm in the process of making the transition.
I'm having some power.
Okay, yeah, I saw that.
Oh, did you see that? Okay, so just after Vanderbilt, just repeat that again. And if it was whatever, I'll have it edited. If not, it'll be adorable to have a little break in your Zoom conversation.
Yeah. So after being at Vanderbilt University, I was recruited out to San Diego to be the division chief of neonatology at University of California, San Diego, and Rady Children's Hospital. And then right now I'm in the transition to moving up to the Bay Area, where I will be chief of neonatal and developmental medicine at Stanford University and co-director of the Johnson Center for Women and Infants Health. So it's been a little bit of an adventure. I've been really lucky to have some fantastic mentors and collaborators along the way, working in areas that I never thought I would, just because that's where the science took us. And right now our lab is focusing on a couple different areas. One is to understand why preterm babies get chronic lung disease. And it's the number one serious complication of being born early is a chronic lung disease called bronchopulmonary dysplasia. Terrible name, but we call it BPD. Basically, babies who are born very early, they grow, they get bigger, their lungs get larger, but they stop developing. And so even when they go home, their living with a lung that is very underdeveloped. And they're at risk of all sorts of other serious complications down the road because of that. So we're trying to understand why some babies get it, why some babies don't, what role their immune system plays in this, and how can we turn on normal lung growth and regeneration in some of these patients. You know, how can we stimulate that healing process to actually form new lung tissue that looks more normal? And one of the things that got it kind of started off as a sidetrack, but now we're putting a lot of focus into, is the fact that when people get H1N1 influenza, parts of their lungs are completely devastated, but can then regenerate. Some of it stays scarred lung tissue, but some of it does regenerate. And so we have a large project going on now to look at how early life exposures might change how that lung regeneration happens. And we're trying to understand that at a very basic level. And the idea being that if we can understand that, well, we might be able to then promote lung regeneration in a lot of different lung diseases, you know, maybe even like coronavirus.
Exactly. That's what brought me to this conversation with you. Just last week, I was speaking with one of our scientists over at the Sylvester Center and looking at the strategies that they're looking at in the lab to fight cancer. They're saying, well, are there some applications with this disease, with this virus? And like that, I just wanted to drill down a little bit and talk a little bit about coronavirus. And so awesome and so interconnected that, you know, that we started at the University of Miami. Look what happened to you. You got to be, I'm going to call the alumni office so they profile you as, you know, come on, this is one of our greats right here, Lance Prince, you know. But let's talk a little bit about coronavirus in California right now. I think the folks here in Miami, where the Miami Corona Project is based, get a sense of just how problematic the situation is and how it's even getting worse and worse. And although we never had the kind of peak that California had, went down and is back again, we're clearly, like Texas, like Arizona, like California, you know, a place that is an epicenter, right? It's a hotspot for this pandemic. Can you just even from a resident's point of view, just tell us what's happening in California?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. As a resident and as a you know, a father, husband, and son, and as a scientist, it's really been sad. You know, I just you know, because we're living through something that I can't believe that we weren't able to do something a little bit better. But so anyway, so California is one of the first places to really go on lockdown, if you will. We really encourage people to stay home, and we of course adopted that around in our community. And everything was closed. Nobody really. I mean, I would make a once a week trip to the grocery store and buy as much food as I could think of that we needed for the week. And we were trying to be very, very careful, and that was all of it getting out really we did, other than when I had to work at the hospital. And we were hovering at about 100 to 140 cases a day in San Diego County. And it was being kind of steady. The ICUs were okay. Most of the patients that we were getting were coming from the places in San Diego where there's a higher population density in areas along the border in Imperial County. And then Memorial Day, end of May, like everybody else, things started loosening up. Bars and restaurants started opening. People got a little bit lax, and it happened to be the time of year when people think, okay, now's the time we drive to San Diego to go to the beach or do whatever. And sure enough, mid-June, we started to see cases go up. And so we went from about 100 to 150 cases a day in San Diego. I think yesterday we were 650 cases or something like that. And it's been in San Diego, it's been mostly gatherings, bars and restaurants. You know, and then the whole idea of whether or not it's safe to be out and whether or not I should wear a mask has become politicized, which is really tragic because people are dying because of that. And it's changed the discussion. It's really made it, you know, we've gotten away from talking about how we can help each other and how we can protect our community to whether or not I'm right or you're right and who do you believe. And that's sad, especially in the faces. As a scientist, I'm realizing we're learning more about this virus every day. And you know, yes, there are things we said as a scientific community back in February and March that now we're revisiting, but that's the way it goes, you know, and the fact that that is somehow politicized is really tragic. In San Diego, we've now taken a big step back. Bars and restaurants are now closed. Restaurants only do takeout. Haircut salons were closed again. It's created a huge angst amongst the community. Jobs are being, in question now, but people are being asked to stay home more and not be out as much. We're starting to see deaths go up in the county a little bit more. They've been stable over the last week or so, but it's all been exactly to when we started loosening up our restrictions in May. 2 weeks later, we started to see more cases. Another month later, we started to see more deaths. Luckily, our ICUs are still okay. The number of ventilated patients we have is about the same as it has been. We're still seeing most of the cases are people under the age of 30. They're young people. Most of the deaths are still people who are above the age 50. So that hasn't changed. And
kids bring it home, and then their parents get the disease, right? That's the
right. And so, and now if you look around now, San Diego has stepped back. Orange County, just to our north, has been a little bit reticent to put in the restrictions that they should. LA was really, really bad for a while. We still see a lot of cases along the border. Now in California, if you look statewide, a lot of the hot spots, even though the populations are a lot smaller there, a lot of the hot spots from the Central Valley, where people are, much more likely to be working in agriculture, food industry, and the politics are a little more conservative. I hope that's not really causing that, but I have a suspicion that it probably is. And so,
as it is in Orange County, right? That may be the right. Yeah. No, I think we're seeing that. I think it's fair to say that this has been politicized. Literally, a public health issue has clearly been politicized. So, and part of, I think, is I was speaking with a medical school professor out of Malaysia a few weeks ago in one of these conversations, just to get a sense of what was happening, not just on the other side of our nation, which is what you're doing, but on the other side of our planet. And she was looking at some similarities between undocumented persons and how they were treated in Malaysia and the way we treat ours here, and how that and how some vulnerabilities that we experience. I spoke to a United Teachers of Date president here about the fault lines that exist, the things that we always knew were there, but all of a sudden, the disparities that exist between minority populations or populations that have less access to healthcare or economic stability, and how those are impacted more. Does the same thing hold for your community?
Absolutely. So on several levels, when you tell someone to stay home, don't go to work, because it's important for the health of yourself, your family, and all those around you, you're putting a family at risk, and government has stepped up and trying to help people as much as possible, but it's probably not enough. And there are a lot of people who were undocumented who do a lot of great work here in San Diego and Southern California, the community, and they're still feeling like they have to go to work. And that puts them in a very tough situation where they're exposing themselves unnecessarily, and they're potentially bringing it home to their family. And we're absolutely seeing this, and that's absolutely one of the reasons why one of our first hotspots was in the El Centro area in Imperial County, and now we're seeing it in the Central Valley. And people. I don't think people realize that on any given day, 40 to 50,000 people come across the border between Tijuana and San Diego. I mean, Tijuana is not some foreign land here. It's a suburb of San Diego. We're a suburb of Tijuana. The communities are absolutely meshed. And even though things have slowed down now, there are still a lot of people who come back and forth every day. U.S. citizens who live in Mexico, Mexican citizens who spend a lot of time in San Diego. And so that traffic has still had to continue for people's livelihoods, and which has forced people to be exposed. The other side that I want to kind of come back to is that when we think we're understanding this a little bit at the scientific level, but the people that are most likely to die from coronavirus infections are people with diabetes. And diabetes is one of the major risk factors for this disease. And I'm not going to get into all the endothelial cell biology and all that stuff, but we know And we've known for years that around the world, the type 2 diabetes epidemic, if you will, is really targeting people of lower socioeconomic status. There are places in San Diego that are absolutely food deserts. There are places where kids are not learning about proper nutrition. They're not getting the proper nutrition at home or in the schools. And that's putting them at risk we've been seeing this epidemic of obesity and type 2 diabetes since early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. It's been coming up. It's been coming. We've been talking about it. We're letting people know. I'm not going to talk anything about the sugar industry here.
I can beat that industry up from polluting the Everglades to diabetes. Don't get me started.
And so, and it just so happens that this virus really targets people with diabetes. And so what you're seeing is an absolute twofold disparity risk, right? One is medical, because we know that diabetes is more likely to be present in minorities and people with lower socioeconomic status. And by forcing people to find a way to get out to earn income to feed their family, basically, and to work in places like that, where they don't have PPE or protection, you're putting people at additional risk. And so on two different, but I guess interconnected ways, this virus is really hurting those of us who are less fortunate.
I want to get back to your research and some connection to the coronavirus or its treatment or vaccination or something. But before I do, let's just finish on the social policy issue. And that is basically the vulnerabilities that were exposed are vulnerabilities all of us were aware of. They're just now known to the broader community. And similarly, the idea that you have to fund science and fund public health, and that science matters, and that people are now more conversant on science topics, especially regarding a pandemic, than they were before this pandemic, are all things that move, I think, us in the positive direction of rethinking about how we govern and how we allocate resources in our society. Do you think, and this is not a question to scientists, this is a question to Lance, the guy I would have all sorts of political conversations with at the university back in the day. Do you think that our society has learned, and that these lessons will stay with us when this pandemic is in our rearview window? Do you think we have the capacity as a species, as a nation, two separate things, to really take these lessons and effectuate some lasting change for the pandemic that is yet to come?
I certainly hope so. There are a lot of reasons to be pessimistic right now, but the Buddhist spirit within me would try to want to think that this could be an opportunity where people might be a little bit more enlightened about the realities, and this is really about finding ways to help each other. That's what this is all about, right? Helping each other, not putting people at risk, caring for those that are less fortunate, caring for those that are sick, caring for those that are older. And that's what it's all about, and you don't want to, you can't blame somebody else for this. The point is to do it in a way that's truly compassionate for our fellow people, our neighbors, our family, and our other citizens. And so, gosh, I'm really hopeful. In one way that you could think about it, the fact that, and as much as I love restaurants and craft beer and all that kind of stuff, maybe this has forced people to come home and spend more time cooking at home and understanding what goes into their meals and bringing that back a little bit. Maybe people will eat a little bit healthier because of this, and if that happens by, say, 10%, could that move the needle a little bit? I don't know. I certainly hope so. But the world's going to be a little different, isn't it?
Yeah. How is it going to be a little bit different because of the research you're conducting? What are you planning to do, and what applications do you think you can have with maybe not this particular disease, but future pandemics, but those especially that impact the respiratory system, even though as we know, it's not just a pulmonary disease. This COVID-19 impacts all sorts of systems. So is there anything you can talk about to connect your current research, with applications with this or future pandemics, including pollution and, all the, the world we're in today?
Right. No, I know. So thanks for the opportunity. So, so first, as a physician scientist, I cannot help but feel like a complete failure during all this, right? Here we are as a society, we invest billions of dollars in medical research. And yet our best therapy right now is something that we could have done when we lived in caves. Everybody's just stay home, right? Which is effective, but it's insulting to me as a physician scientist that we haven't been able to do something better for the people of our society that deserve better. And so it really makes me cringe that we can't do better. And there are some drugs out there that have some promise. A lot of this stuff is we've kind of known about for a while. It's probably helping a little. But the way that our lab is trying to approach this is that, there's going to be other viruses. That we had SARS-1, we had MERS, we now just the SARS-CoV-2. There are going to be other respiratory viruses, and some of them may look like Ebola virus. Some of them may look like, a crazy strain of rhinovirus or influenza. Who knows? And so we know it's going to take a while to develop a vaccine, even if the new RNA-based vaccines work really well. To get those tested, make sure they work. Every time those come about, it's going to take some time to develop a vaccine. What my lab is interested in are the mechanisms by which the lung can protect itself from infection, but then clean up the mess, if you will, right? Be able to heal a damaged lung or an injured lung and cause it to regenerate. So that we're not necessarily targeting the virus per se or the bacteria that causes pneumonia. It's about protecting the rest of the lung as the immune system tackles that. And so to keep the lung from being irreparably damaged. And so my hope is that we can develop a modular strategy there where regardless of the type of virus or bacteria that causes a major infection, the principles around healing the lung and repairing that injury could be applied to any virus, any new virus. And so now they do attack the lung a little bit differently. SARS-CoV-2, it causes a lot of endothelial and vascular damage in the lung and other tissues as well. But what probably kills people in the end, I think, is going to be some of the clots and vascular damage within the lung. So we need to be able to understand a way to prevent that. But if we can disconnect that strategy from the virus itself, then my hope is it would give us a new approach where the next virus that comes along, once we understand how it works and how it hurts people, we'll have something on the shelf that's ready to go. And we can develop a vaccine, of course, but we won't need to be dependent upon that vaccine to give some people some hope. So that's kind of our approach.
You've always been one of my very favorite people on planet Earth.
You too, Xavier.
Stanford is so lucky to have you. They
really,
really are. And I can't wait to see what comes from that. I know these are, these are really difficult times for all of us. And I just think that staying positive, right? And trying to look at hopeful ways or hopeful approaches are how we navigate through this, and to have a sense, as you said, that we're just trying to do good. I just want to sort of leave with having you just give a message to our Kane community here in Miami as one of our alums, just something hopeful for them to take away with, that both in your community and here in your alma mater. We're about to go through probably the worst times vis-a-vis this pandemic. The numbers keep on going up. There's so much uncertainty. We don't know we're going to close down yet. We're standing here on the 26th of July, not knowing what a week from now is going to look like. Our classes open up on August 17th. There's going to be a lot of insecurity and unpredictability as this rolls out. And I just, hearing it from the doc, right? Like, give us something to hold on to get us through this.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to be a history major to see all the times that we as a country have gone through very tough, dark times and have emerged on the other end stronger. And, and heck, Miami has as well. I mean, look at Miami's a very young city that's been through an awful lot of different, very dynamic things that have happened to it. And it's become a very different city each time, and a better, stronger city, and UM is the same way. UM's a very young university. I went there because it was so exciting and there was so much optimism around it. And there were so many people that thought of doing things a different way. Look at all the different great projects you've been working on, Xavier. That's exemplifies the spirit at UM. And so, the thing that I would tell the students is that, yes, this is a very weird time and nobody knows exactly the right way to navigate it. And, but you got to look out for yourself. You got to look out for each other. Take care of yourself. Take care of other people. And remember, the idea is to learn from this. We're all trying to learn from this. You're at a fantastic university. Yes, the classes are going to be different. Is online learning as good as in person? I don't know. But the point is to try to really embrace this and recognize that we're going to come out on the other end, and to try to learn as much as you can, because that's ultimately, what matters. I can't tell you how many things I remember that I learned at UM in college. And this time will really impact us all. So, everyone just needs to keep an open heart and open mind and know that we're going to get through it.
Thanks, Lance. It's always awesome talking to you. I'll talk to you offline and see when we connect again for a little happy hour.
Okay, sounds great.
See you later.
See you.
Bye.